Hi everybody and welcome back to Harry's Music Room. I wanted to do a video on some books. I've been buying Beatle books lately, and I probably have a couple hundred in my library already. But I was watching a video by Matt at Pop Go the 60s, and he was talking about some of his favorite Beatle books. And kind of got me interested in trying to find the ones that I didn't already have. So, anyways, I went out and I've been buying up some books. And this week I've got Julia Baird, Imagine This, growing up with my brother John Lennon. Julia was John's half sister, same mother, younger than John. And after John's death, she wrote another book called John Lennon, My Brother. This was actually her first book. And this is one, I believe this was one of the ones that Matt suggested. And this is a book full of letters that John would write to people. So this one I'm really kind of going through just a little bit at a time. You can just turn to a page and read about it. This one was called The Beatles Are Here, 50 years after the band arrived in America. Writers, musicians, and other fans remember. Those are the kind I like to read. First person, how they felt and what the reaction was and how they affected them. Behind Sad Eyes, The Life of George Harrison. And, I find that if you read, especially like I found this out with Led Zeppelin, I read one book and it was like, well, is this real? I mean, did these stories really happen? So then I thought, I'm going to read another book. And then I read a third. And I ended up reading like 4 books in about 2 months on Led Zeppelin. And if you put all that information together from the different sources, you can kind of figure out what the real story is. So that's what got me thinking I want to continue reading more about the Beatles and getting into more Beatle books. This book was really interesting. The Importance of the Beatles. And this was made for libraries and classrooms. It wasn't like something you'd find at your bookstore. But I wanted to read a section in here that I thought is really explain. There's so many people that, oh, the Beatles. I'm tired of hearing about the Beatles and what they do, and unless you grew up at that time, you have no idea. So I just wanted to read some of this. There has never been a band quite like the Beatles. There may never be again. The Beatles are first of all remembered for their contributions as songwriters and recording artists. From the time they burst on the scene like firecrackers in 1963 to their breakup in 1970, the band completely dominated the world music scene. They racked up more record-breaking hits than any group in musical history. They set new standards for song composition and transformed the art of record production. They were the first successful singer-songwriters. Before them, only a few popular singers performed songs they had written themselves. And, nowadays people think, oh, singer-songwriter, everybody writes it. But no, back then, they were very unique that they were writing songs and recording songs that they wrote. It just wasn't done, especially by pop groups. It says, and that's the other thing. Their first album went to number 1, and it stayed there until it was knocked out by their second album, which then went to number 1. So, I mean, they dominated, absolutely dominated. But they were also the most remarkable cultural and sociological phenomenon of our time. They transformed the look, sound, and style of a generation. And they absolutely did. Literally overnight. You have no idea. Unless you were there, you have no idea the impact they had. I mean, I don't know about in Great Britain. I know that it took about a year to really blow up there. It took a day to blow up here. I mean, it was Ed Sullivan and it was on. So absolutely they transformed their generation. They won the hearts of millions with their charm and wit, and they angered many, many more through their controversial actions and outrageous statements. Like them or loathe them, they were the essence of their era. Swinging London, the hippie movement, Eastern religion, peace and love, a phenomenon like Beatlemania, with its hysterical crowds near religious devotion, had appeared at other times and has often been imitated, but the intensity of Beatlemania has never been matched. I would say with Taylor Swift, I think it's been matched. What she's done is truly amazing. But for what the Beatles did in their time, it absolutely blows my mind. Above all, they were a unit. John, Paul, George, and Ringo, the Fab Four. They had a little help from their friends, in particular Brian Epstein, who molded their initial public image, brought them world acclaim, and George Martin, the gifted record producer who helped them perfect their sound in the studio. But the distinct personalities of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr produced a unique blend. Without that chemistry, there would have been no Beatles. John Lennon was quoted as saying, "None of us would have made it alone, because Paul wasn't strong enough, I didn't have enough girl appeal, George was too quiet, and Ringo was the drummer. But we thought everyone should be able to dig at least one of us," and that's how it turned out. Despite this reputation as adored idols who became spokesmen for their generation and shapers of fashion and thought, the Beatles remain human beings complete with faults and failures. Some critics say that the band merely imitated styles excuse me, by less famous sources. Many people feel that the Beatles' experiments with drug-influenced music were misguided. Their personal lives were often chaotic, and their breakup was as messy and vicious as a divorce. In the end, they were simply four friends who formed a little band, who formed a little band because they liked to play music. When that band suddenly became famous, these friends, growing quickly from teenagers to maturity in the world spotlight, had to deal with both the pleasures and the pains of stardom. In many ways, Liverpool, the Beatles' birthplace, was an unlikely breeding ground. Today is world famous as their birthplace. But most Britons in the 1950s and early 60s looked down on the scruffy port city as a dirty, blue-collar backwater. Nonetheless, the Liverpool of those days nourished the band because it was isolated from cultural centers. It gave them the freedom to innovate and experiment. Because it was a working-class town, it fostered their down-to-earth personalities, anything for attention attitudes, and their sarcastic wit. On top of this, the city's unusual connection with a strange new music called rock and roll. This was a sound the rest of England barely knew, but one that the four young friends heard loud and clear. So I just wanted to, it's a good book. That's just a little bit of what just the book is started with. So I'm looking forward to reading the rest of this. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're a Beatle fan, leave me a comment below. And until next time, ciao.